What do you think about the people that are like, I could never give up my baby?
In most cases, the surrogates do not want this baby. They are doing this for someone else. They are very clear in their mind why they're doing this.
Are you being coerced into doing this because you need money?
What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the Queer Collective podcast. I'm your host, Carbon.
I'm Emily.
And I'm Nici.
And welcome to the show. And this episode is sponsored by Vizzy Hard Seltzer and Field, but more on that later.
In the queer community, we build our families in untraditional ways, one of them being surrogacy. In today's episode, we'll discuss how surrogacy actually works, the dark side of the global industry, the surrogate experience, and queer birthing. So let's get into it.
And today, our guest is Nici. Nici is the co-founder of the surrogacy agency, Hive Surrogacy. She is a mother of two and has been a surrogate herself. Surrogacy gave Nici the opportunity to show her children how selfless acts can change lives and that family isn't defined by blood. Nici's passion for birth work is what brought her into the surrogacy field. Thank you, Nici, for joining us on the show.
Thank you so much for having me. I've been a big fan of the show for a while, so I'm
amazing.
excited to be here. Yeah.
Great to have you.
The first place we want to start is kind of a background on surrogacy. And I'm wondering if you can first tell us what the role of a surrogacy agency actually is.
Agencies vary in their roles depending on how they want to serve their clients. At Hive, we're a full service agency, so we're basically there from like the very beginning of the journey to the very end. Surrogacy agencies aren't necessarily needed by people. Some people do things independently, but a lot of people have a feeling of safety having an agency, either the surrogate or the intended parents, just to have like that extra person to support you through it, especially if you're coming as an international family, to have somebody in Canada to be ensuring that they're supporting your surrogate and also like making sure that everything's happening as it should be when you're so far away. At our agency, we also help with like receipt management. So as we'll talk about later, surrogacy in Canada is an altruistic arrangement. And so that means that surrogates need to provide receipts in order to receive any kind of reimbursement for the, lost wages or anything like that. So we help manage all of that kind of stuff with their receipts and everything, but we're also there as emotional support. We book their appointments for them. We make sure that everything's moving as it should. If maybe contracts are taking a little bit longer, we're lighting fires under butts, making sure that everything's happening, because a lot of it is based on the surrogate cycle. And so, if we have a bit of a timeline there, we're making sure that everything is happening as it should. So it's basically like being a project manager of the whole journey.
Right. Yeah, I was going to say project managing for everybody, making sure everybody's doing the thing that they're supposed to do at the right time.
Yeah, with feelings.
With
big feelings.
A lot of feelings, I'm sure.
Yeah.
You mentioned having international families and things like that. What's usually, would you say, like the average ratio in terms of like Canadian parents seeking surrogacy versus international parents?
A lot of people come to Canada because it's illegal in their country to either do surrogacy at all or like as a same-sex couple or as a single person. And so they don't have as many options where they're from. So that's why they would go to like Canada or the US or, somewhere else. But at Hive, we try to keep things 50-50. We get a lot of international people messaging us all the time. I think because Angie, who's my business partner, and myself both carried for international families in France. And so we get, I think just based on that, we get a lot of people from France, a lot of same-sex families from France. But we also know that people come into surrogacy for all different reasons. And some people really want to have a close relationship. And so they want to have somebody who's more local. So we try to keep it about 50-50. But I would say that like when it comes to the families that come to us, I would say we do have more international than we do local.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Why France? Is it illegal in France?
Very.
Very illegal in France.
Very,
okay.
Yeah. Like you can't even talk to your doctor about it. If your doctor to talk to you about it, they could lose their medical license.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it's a big deal.
And they're allowed to seek it out like internationally though and bring the baby to them?
They are. It's a bit of a different legal process when they get here. So in Canada, the parents are immediately seen as the child's parents, where there they have to like go and do more paperwork in order to make them a French citizen and to ensure that both of them are their legal parents.
Specifically, do you focus on queer parents or is it kind of everybody?
It's kind of everybody, but I have to say that it's two very different journeys, right? Okay. So I feel like when I'm working with people who have gone through fertility issues themselves, it's like surrogacy is like their last resort. It's like their last choice. It's not something they want, but are something they're very, very thankful for. Where with same-sex families, they're like, this is amazing. I can have a baby of my own genetics with my my partner. Sometimes the egg donor is also the other partner's sister or something like that. So like they can both have babies of their own genetics. And it's just a way to like normalize same-sex families and give them the same kind of rights that we have. So it's just two very different journeys. And so my job is very different in the support that I give each type of person, because there's a lot of hurt that comes with one of it. And then there's a lot of joy that comes with the other. And in the end, it hopefully all ends with joy, but like the place where it's coming from is very different.
Very interesting. Yeah, I didn't think about that, but that's so true that the emotions around it would be very different depending on, I suppose, like the type of couple that you are, whether it's same sex or opposite sex couples.
Yeah. And also it's like, you know, around the time in the pregnancy where maybe the woman had lost the baby themselves. So maybe they've lost a baby at like 20 weeks. Around that time in their surrogate's pregnancy, they might have a lot of big feels around that time. And so like our support comes in there in a lot of different ways as well.
Whereas with like a lot of queer couples, they probably have like processed that grief of like not being able to have a family in a traditional sense on their own a while ago.
Yeah. I mean, they know they don't have all of the ingredients it takes to make a baby by themselves. But like, this is a celebration for queer families for sure.
What is the process to seek, first of all, and then obtain surrogacy support like what Hive provides?
So there's a few companies in Canada that provide surrogacy support. And so I always suggest to people to like go and talk to everybody, because at the end of the day, there has to be a large level of trust and to know that like when I'm guiding somebody that I'm doing it in what I believe is their best interest. And so you need to see eye to eye with the people that you are having support you in this very big, very unique, very delicate process. I do encourage people to go and talk to multiple agencies. We're a much smaller agency. So some people want the big flashy agency, and then some people want the more like grassroots, smaller agencies. And that's kind of what we go for. The first thing you're going to do is create your embryos. And that is either through getting an egg donor or getting a sperm donor, if there's a heterosexual couple that can use their own eggs and sperm themselves. And through that, they have to start the process of IVF. They have to go through a lot of medications in order to produce a lot of mature eggs. They get extracted, and then they get the sperm put inside of them. And basically over the course of 5 days, they watch how long these things will grow and if they're growing properly, and then you'll know how many embryos you have. So once people have embryos, that's when they can start looking for a surrogate. Sometimes people do things at the same time, but making embryos can take a really long time, especially if you're using a donor, because you just don't know what's going to happen. It all has to do with bodies and timing and all that kind of stuff. So I highly encourage people to go and speak to many surrogate agencies, because we're there to guide you, and we want to make sure that like we all see eye to eye and that you're trusting the person that you're actually going to be working with in this very delicate and long, potentially 18-month long process. So you want to make sure it's somebody you're going to like get on with. And that's on my side of things too, right? Like I want to make sure that there's going to be harmony in our relationship when we're doing this project together. At that point, we can start to talk about like, what are your ideas of how your relationship is going to be with this person? What is your no-goes? Like how do you feel about termination? How do you feel about, the relationship with the surrogate after the baby's born? So we want to make sure that we look at all those like really hard questions. So that way, when it comes to like matching and stuff like that with the right person, that everybody sees eye to eye on what they want going forward. And I mean, like any relationship, we can all say what we want, and what's going to happen is going to happen, but it's all a matter of like putting your best foot forward to go for the same common goal.
Well, ideally, you can say that with any relationship.
Sure, exactly, right? And so we also take note that this is unlike any relationship that most people have been in before. And so Angie and I are there to be like the mediators for those kind of like hard questions when the intended parents are like, so when are you going to get your period, right? Like, stuff like that, if people aren't feeling super comfortable at first. The surrogate has to go through a bunch of screening. There's psychological screening, physical screening. They have to go to their own doctor to ensure that like their doctor says they don't have any issues with them becoming pregnant again. So the first things that we're looking at is like, is this safe for the surrogate to go through? Do they have like the support, the family support, the friend support? Like, if something were to happen or if the surrogate ends up in the hospital, is there someone there to take care of her kids? Is everybody going to be okay? You go for all the blood work, for sonohistograms, you talk to a nurse, you talk to the psych evaluator. It's like a few weeks before you get any kind of clearance, like medical clearance based on all the things. They're also testing for like drugs, any STDs, like that kind of stuff too. After that starts the legal process. So the surrogate and the intended intended parents have their own legal counsel that specialize in human reproduction. They come with an agreement that looks at literally everything. And I think that this is one of the parts that's most difficult for people because it's very black and white.
Yeah.
There's no emotion in it. There's no like any kind of feel for why anybody's actually doing this. It's kind of like, okay, if you were to get in a car accident, like, you know, are you okay to be on life support so that the baby can stay alive? And you're like, whoa,
It's
like
harsh.
this this is intense.
That's
right?
quite a lot, yeah.
It's a lot, yeah. But also in there, we talk about what are like reimbursable expenses. So like what kind of things do you need to spend money on in order to be pregnant? Like I wouldn't be buying maternity clothing if I wasn't pregnant with your baby. Therefore, those kinds of things should be covered. And it's like, how much for that? And all that kind of stuff. So it's about a 40-page long process.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
40 pages.
Oh, yeah. And it's like, there's even stuff like, you know, if something were to happen to the intended parents, where is this baby going?
Right.
You know, stuff like that. Like,
What's the usual answer for that? Is there a common answer or is it super different per
It's like
person?
godparents, right?
kind of, yeah. Like it is very different. Almost in every single case, the surrogate is like, not me. Like, you know, it's, you know, this is not my baby. And so often it would go to like, a godparent or like an aunt or an uncle, potentially the parents of the intended parents as well. So it's like, it's all in there. After you complete your legals, you get legal clearance, which gets sent to the clinic. And then you can start the process of IVF and hopefully get pregnant.
Wow, that's a
Yeah.
lot
It is,
to go
yeah.
through that I probably have never considered in my life.
The actual like exchange of the child, I feel like that's like the last part of it that people are probably interested in.
Yeah. I mean, so when you're going through IVF, you're going to be having a lot of them watching you very closely for the first 12 weeks of the pregnancy because you're still on IVF medication. But then after that, it becomes like a typical pregnancy where you're just going to your regular doctor or midwife for the care that you would typically in any other pregnancy. But then as it gets kind of closer to the end, like social workers and stuff like that need to get involved if it's a hospital birth. But according to the contract, as soon as the baby is born, they are technically the parent's baby. The handing off is actually a very special moment. And many, many surrogates say, like, I want to be the one to physically like give them the baby. It's this like kind of like monumental moment of it all. As far as like there being feels around that of like giving a baby away, I don't really feel that's my experience with most of the people that I've worked with, that they feel like they're giving the baby back as opposed to like giving them away. Because
it's like some intense babysitting they've been doing.
Some intense like oven babysitting, baking that baby. Like the way you get pregnant, like you watch it happen on a screen, right? Like you watch them put the baby in your belly, right? So it's very different, right? And right from the beginning, you know what you're in for. And also you're just so excited for your intended parents. Like you fall in love with them. Like it's not even like you love the baby, but like you love them. And so you're excited for them to become parents.
Yeah.
That's really nice.
Yeah.
One thing I did want to ask, just to clarify as well, is kind of the difference between traditional surrogacy and gestational surrogacy. If you can explain that and also kind of explain why gestational surrogacy, I guess, has become more popular now.
So traditional surrogacy is when a surrogate is using their own egg to grow the baby, and gestational is when you are using someone else's egg. So like they're using the process of IVF to put the embryo inside of you. Gestational surrogacy always has to be done in a fertility clinic. I think gestational surrogacy has become more popular because, first of all, especially with international clients, it's really hard to do traditional surrogacy based on the timing of ovulation and all that kind of stuff. It is legally far more difficult to do a traditional surrogacy because you're kind of doing...
You're actually the birth mom.
Yeah, you're actually the biological mom, right? And so there's like a whole other part of that, which, you know, in many places of the world would have to go through a very extensive adoption process because that person is the biological parent. You know, just with gestational, it's something that can be monitored more. You know, there's more cooks in the kitchen to watch to make sure everything's happening the way that it should, where you can't actually do traditional surrogacy through a clinic. Like some will do it, but it's not something that is is done very often. In order for them to do IVF and do the embryo transfer, you have to do a ultrasound at the same time. So the doctor, the embryologist, and the ultrasound tech, and you, and potentially the intended parents, you're all sort of like watching yourself. And they actually call it the shooting star because when they put it through, it makes this little flash of light.
Cool.
And so they call it the little shooting star, which is very cute.
It's kind of cool that you can see it.
I mean, you're like, and then they're like, you're pregnant. And you're like, whoa, like it's a trip. Like, and it's a very fast process too. It only takes like 10 minutes too. So you're like, okay.
So I'm wondering how much you would estimate that a surrogacy process can cost for an intended parent.
So in Canada, Angie and I tell people that it's going to be between $100,000 and $150,000, which is a large chunk of money.
It's quite a bit.
It's quite a bit of money, yeah. The reason that there is such a varying cost is because we don't know what's going to happen, right? So we like to look at the money as like two pots, right? We're like, you're going to be paying your clinic, you're going to be paying your lawyers, you're going to be paying your agency, you're going to be giving your surrogate their reimbursement, right? So typically surrogate reimbursements are between like $25,000 to $30,000 for the journey. And that's like, for those reimbursable expenses that I told you about. But what happens if when your surrogate is 5 months pregnant, ends up on bed rest in the hospital, right? Who's going to walk their dogs? Who's going to take care of their kids and get them to and from school? Who's going to clean their house? There's all these different costs that can come with this. Are you going to get pregnant the first time or are you going to take 5 times to get pregnant, right? Yeah. Each transfer costs money. So we like to look at it at those two pots. This is definitely what's going to be spent. And then there's this potential for other things, right? Yeah. If your surrogate needs a C-section, there's like an extra amount that's generally in their contract because you're going to need more time to heal and need more assistance during that time. Yeah. So there's a whole bunch of like unknowns. And so we have the known pot and the unknown pot.
How does that compare with other countries around the world, like in terms of how much you'd probably be likely to pay?
In some countries, it is definitely cheaper. When you're looking at places like Colombia or India, there are altruistic arrangements there as well. But like when you look at the cost of living and stuff like that for people, those reimbursements are going to be far less. The agency fees are going to be far less. But if you actually look in like the US, the agency fees are a lot more, right? So it kind of depends on where you're going. It also has to do with like what kind of things that your surrogate can have access to, right? Yeah. So in Canada, it's going to cost more, but like I believe that we have all the resources and a lot of extra help and like forethought for the people for their health going forward, not just during the surrogacy, but past that as well.
Considering all of the expenses, the expenses for the lawyers, the expenses for, obviously if you're going through an agency, the agency itself, medical bills, all of those expenses. In Canada, as I understand it, it is illegal to pay the surrogate other than the expenses that come with bearing the child, right? Do you personally think that surrogates should also be paid on top of that?
This is a really great question. People ask me it all the time. And my answer is yes. I do think that surrogates should get paid because I believe money is an energy exchange. I believe that a lot of people use their bodies to make money in lots of ways. Professional athletes, this is something that someone can do. And honestly, there is no amount of money that makes this worth it. Like, you don't know what you're going through. You don't know what your birth's going to be like. You don't know if you're going to need surgery after. You don't know if you're going to pee yourself every time after, you give birth. What are we putting worth on somebody doing IVF? Like, we look at like, how much does a news reporter make, right? Like there's a typical price for what people make for that. So what would a typical price be for somebody to go through IVF, carry a baby for 9 months, have to go to all the appointments that come with that, right? But then there's other things, right? So it's like the whole, like, does she have 4 kids or 1 kid? That's going to be a lot more, that's going to be a lot more money for childcare. Does she make $100,000 a year or is she a stay-at-home mom? Like there's a whole bunch of other things, right? So I don't have the right answer for like, what should that be? But like looking at it as the two pots, what do we think is a fair wage for somebody to be doing this? And then because it takes up your time, a lot of time, people lose their jobs, people like, just like any other like, person with a uterus who is carrying a baby, like they go through all the rigmarole of being pregnant at work, all that kind of stuff. It's not easy. So what is that price? And then what is the extra needs of that person based on their life? If this person has to take a day off work, do they have to drive 100 kilometers to go to their appointment? Do they have to take the bus, right? Like
it's a pain and suffering pot.
Exactly. Yes. That's a really good way of put it, right? So like the typical, these are definitely all the things you're going to do. And then like, these are the things that I need in order for it to not put me out of money, essentially.
I think that with this question, and probably the reason why it's so tricky, and also probably the reason why it's illegal to pay for it in that way in Canada, is that potentially there's a lot of room there for exploitation, perhaps, or that could be like a worry. With money, I think a lot of potential other problems could come with it, although I do agree with what you're saying as well. Is there some sort of big thing that we should look out for if that were to be the case, or what's your opinion? Is it like only a net positive, or could more complications come with it?
I mean, I think when it comes to money, there can definitely be like power dynamics. I'm paying for you to do this, therefore you have to eat this, or, you have to be going and doing yoga every day, or, I'm just making up big examples. But,
no, there's good ones.
But I think negativity can come from it. But I think that when it comes to those kinds of laws and stuff like that, they're looking at the safety of the intended parents a lot in that kind of way, and not the exploitive potential for the surrogates. And so health and readiness, I think, is something that we need a lot more in our laws to ensure that if it is a compensated act, that there is safety for the surrogates, and that there is like mental health support, and there is all of these things, and that's a part of the law too, not just making sure that the intended parents are kind of like covered and making sure they're not getting like cheated out of money or whatever, because we're dealing with a human life here, and not just like a human life, but like their children, if they have a partner, like everyone around them, right? Like this is affecting a lot of people. And so not just to ensure that the surrogate is going to be okay, but their family as well, because you'd be surprised at like how involved your children get in this kind of situation as well. And so we want to make sure that everybody's okay. I think that this might be a great opportunity to take people from a place of poverty into not, right? Yeah. But that also includes proper compensation, right? And what does that mean? Why is a surrogate in the US making X amount of dollars, but a surrogate in India or Mexico or Colombia or Laos or wherever is making, not even half that. And in those kind of scenarios, they don't even get to see the baby sometimes. They don't meet the intended parents. There's all these different things. So even though it's an altruistic arrangement, that sounds great, but then you don't even meet the intended parents that you've carried a baby for. So I think that there's a lot farther we need to go than being altruistic or paid. Like it has to do with like health going forward after the baby's born as well.
What kind of ethical concerns do people bring up when they're talking about potentially paying surrogates? Like, for what reason do you think the Canadian government has decided that it has to be altruistic?
I mean, there's a lot of laws that control women's bodies and what we do with them. And so there's a part of me that thinks that that has to do with it, that it has to do with a little bit of control. There's a lot of really good opportunities to look at examples in the States and how that can work really well. But for whatever reason, Canada is kind of like putting a blind eye to that. They might be saying that people are doing it for the wrong reasons. And it's like, what are the wrong reasons? Is that money? Okay, like what's wrong with money? Like, that's okay, right? Like I said before, it's an exchange, right? Is there a potential for someone to take advantage of intended parents and say like, I want this amount of money, and people are desperate, and so they say yes, right? Yeah. So that's why I think if we just like look at it right in the face and we're just like, okay, this is how we're going to do it. There's no gray lines here. It's like, this is the amount of money. This is how it's going to work out, and have everybody be safe in the process.
Yeah, I think it can be kind of compared to other situations with our bodies too. Is like, I don't know if this is offensive or not, but I don't think it should be. I'm pro sex worker, but I think you can compare it to sex work. It's like using your body as a means of production.
100%. And I'm not, and I'm totally for it as well. I think also about organ donors.
Like, the second
you know what I mean?
Up.
It's like you get to be an organ donor while you're alive. That's pretty awesome.
It kind of is like growing a whole other organ in your body and then giving it to someone.
Yeah.
And I mean, recently there's a lot of debates happening in the States right now. They're talking about legalizing selling your own organs because their organ list, like, there's not enough people donating organs, and like a lot of people just going on the organ donation list ends up being a death sentence. And they think about it, it's like if they were to put a price on it, more people would be inclined to do it, because if you think about it, there is a huge physical toll on your life. There's a huge cost to it. And if people do a cost benefit analysis, it could make it worth it for them. I think it just puts into consideration, are you being coerced into doing this because you need money? But then what's my mind is like this whole capitalist system is kind of a coercion to keep us like working out of our will. I mean, like no one's really wanting to do any of this.
Yeah, I mean,
we're doing it all for money, you know?
Agreed.
Yeah.
But also like nobody can make you give your organs. Nobody can make you carry a baby for 9 months. There has to, I mean, like maybe you feel like you don't have a better option, maybe in a situation where you're in a really hard position, but this isn't something that is chosen lightly. You're not like, I'm just going to go get pregnant for 9 months. Like, you know, this is something that definitely takes a lot of consideration and a lot of other people asking you, are you sure? Are you sure? Are you sure? Do you understand? Like, and that's a big part of what Angie and I do too, is like we educate people to ensure that they are making an informed choice to know that this is the right path for them.
In the United States, you're able to make probably around like 45 to 70K. And I'm wondering if you think they've been able to do that without this kind of sense of coercion. Like the one thing that would come to mind is someone's in an abusive relationship and their partner is trying to get them to make money for them and they're kind of coerced into that, I guess.
Right.
Is there safeguards for those kinds of situations?
I can't really speak to the US, but like in Canada, if you have a partner, they have to be a part of the legal process. They have to be a part of the psych process as well. And so there is somebody who's also kind of like checking them out, asking all those kinds of questions. They also do a psych alone with the surrogate as well to be like, so are you being forced into this? Like that is a question that gets asked. Like you are doing this of your own free will. And that is, I think, the biggest part of the psych evaluation.
I mean, it sounds like it's not an easy job to get. Because of all of the evaluations and the processes that you kind of have to go through in order to make it to the step where you are a surrogate.
It's such a hard thing too, because then there's this like hierarchy also in the surrogacy community. They're like, well, I'm doing this for altruistic reasons. I'm doing this out of my own heart, you know, and you're just getting paid, right? And it's like, no, man, we're all doing like the good work here. We're all doing amazing things. You're getting paid. I'm not, whatever. Like we're both doing an amazing thing. And so I think just making it very similar across the board will also like add harmony to the community.
You touched on this a little bit in the beginning, but just the fact that in some countries, particularly I saw in Ukraine and then in some countries in Africa, there's a lot of exploitation going on where it's like probably much cheaper to pay a surrogate. In what ways do you think this can be mitigated? Like is there any solution to this?
There's a big thing that we're looking at for like cost of living. And I think that is a big part of why they're getting paid less, right? But at the same time, we're not looking at it as a human experience, right? Like why should a surrogate in Canada or the US rather be paid 2 times as much, 3 times as much, 5 times as much as somebody who's in Ukraine, right? Why should they be able to go and see the doctors that they want to see and be able to meet the baby and have an ongoing relationship with the intended parents if they choose to do so, but the people in Ukraine don't get to do that, right? So I think from a human experience, I believe as somebody who's given birth to my own children, that it has changed my life. Every time I've given birth, it has changed me as a person fundamentally. And so when that happens with anybody, I want them to go forward in that 4th trimester in the best way that they can and be able to ask for the things that they feel like they need in that time. Do they want to see pictures of the baby? Do they want to have time to hold the baby? Do their children get to meet the baby and hold the baby? All of that is really, really important. And so when I think about being exploited, I don't even really think about the money. I think about the experience and how they're going to go forward feeling after the fact for the rest of their life.
Yeah, and that's a really good point too that I didn't mention is there's a lot of other exploitative things happening, like even specifically like surrogacy agencies abroad will probably be telling like different things to both parties. And the intended parents may be thinking that the surrogate is being treated better than they actually are.
In Ukraine, like they have really great facilities and really great hospitals and all that kind of stuff. I've had intended parents who have done like their first journey in Ukraine and then have decided to do it in Canada the second time. And they're like, it was great. They're like, but we had to go and find our surrogate. They wouldn't let us meet her. They wouldn't let us do these things. Like we had to like go in deep and like do all this information so that she could meet the baby and whatever. Cause and then she felt scared that they would find out that she met the baby, but she was so happy in the end that she got to.
What I'm gathering from this is that it doesn't really have to do with surrogacy as a process, but rather with what laws governments put in place in order to make this either easier or harder or simpler to exploit.
What they they believe is easier, what they believe is, they're like, we believe you holding the baby is not what's best for you. Well, after you give birth, what does your body expect? Your body expects to have a baby near you. Like, that's just the way it is. And so that's something that we talk to about our intended parents, just like, her body is going to expect to have a baby around. So for at least for a week after the baby's born, we want you hanging out. We want you staying there. We want her kids to be able to have a time to snuggle with them. Yeah. Some surrogates end up breastfeeding, that kind of stuff too. We make sure that for her own health and like mental well-being going forward, that they get that time with the baby afterwards.
I mean, this is kind of taking me back to, honestly, we discussed this in our sex worker episode where there's these very powerful men at the top of the food chain that have never carried a baby, birthed a baby ever in their lives that are saying, you don't know what's good for you, so we're going to tell you what's good for you. And we think that this is the right way to do it and this is the wrong way to do it, even though I've never done it in my life and never will.
Yeah.
So that's kind of a piss off.
Yeah, a little bit, right? I mean, I'm happy to say that all but I believe one surrogacy agencies in Canada are owned by women. And so like all women who have also like given birth. Luckily, I think when it comes to that level, it's like if there's any kind of like rigmarole, that kind of stuff, we're there to like shut it down right away and be like, actually, you've never done this before.
I do want to disclaim before we move further. I do want to disclaim that I am not comparing sex work to surrogacy work. I am just stating parallels that I've seen come up.
You are not the first person. You are not the first person to bring this up, myself included. Depending on your frame of mind, you can kind of look at it in one way or the other. I think a lot of surrogates would not appreciate to be compared to sex workers, but people use their bodies in their work all the time. And so I, agree that this is an able-bodied, this is a privilege. That was something when I got into this work, I didn't realize what a privilege it was to be able to carry a baby, because 1 in 4 people do suffer from infertility. And so the fact that I got pregnant so easily and like was able to have my own children, like I feel very lucky. And I feel lucky that, I was able to do that for other people as well.
So you mentioned that some of your previous intended parents, they had a positive experience working with mothers in Ukraine. And online, the way that it's painted, like in Vice documentaries and these kinds of things, is it's like a very exploitative, negative thing. I'm wondering what your perspective is. Like, do you think it's unethical to go seek out a surrogate in one of these countries, or is it okay? I mean, I think the thing that I'm challenged with in my mind is the fact that like 100 to 150 grand is like so out of reach for so many people that creates like a really big class divide to starting a family. And then also thinking that it can help pull someone out of poverty potentially. It's not a large chunk of money, but there is levels of exploitation happening. What do you think?
But before we get into that, this podcast is proudly sponsored by Vizzy Hard Seltzer. And with Vizzy's vibrant flavors, you can now follow your own vibe.
For those of you who know Queer Collective, you know that Vizzy has been a longtime supporter of us and our mission to create accurate and positive representation for the entire queer community. So if you are a hard seltzer drinker, we highly recommend drinking and supporting one that you know also supports the queer community. These past 7 months, we've been having a really incredible time exploring ethical non-monogamy in our own relationship because we're dating.
And a huge catalyst for this change has genuinely been exploring things on Field. For those of you who don't know, Field is a dating app geared towards polyamory, ethical non-monogamy, and kink.
If this sounds like something you're interested in exploring, we definitely recommend downloading Field. That's FEELD.
And now, back to the episode.
Is it wrong for people to go and do it?
I don't think it's wrong. I personally, I don't have a ton of experience in other countries when it comes to surrogacy. Yeah. That being said, I don't think I would ever do something this intense in another country without going and checking it out first, right?
Like in person?
In person. What's the hospital my surrogate's going to be taken care of at? What is the area where they live in? All these kinds of things. What are they actually going to be getting compensated or reimbursed for? Talking to other intended parents, talking to community groups. I'm a big researcher like yourself. And so I don't think I could go into anything without looking at all those big, hard questions. As far as it being like a cultural divide, yes, $150,000. I would not have a kid. I wouldn't, because I can't. That being said, when somebody's coming from France and they're paying in euro, that is a lot more worth it to them, right?
The conversion's quite nice.
It's quite nice, right? That's something to look at too. But when I think about people who just want to have a kid, like so badly, and they've already spent $100,000 on their own fertility journey. You know what I mean? Like, and they're desperate and they want this. Like, who am I to say it's wrong for you to go and do this? And you're just contributing to the problem, right? That's a tough question because I know what it feels like to want to be a mother. I don't think it's right to exploit other people in order to gain what you want in your life. But at the same time, I think with proper research to ensure that, you know, you're doing the right thing and not exploiting somebody is also really important.
Yeah.
Totally. I think that a common argument that comes up when it comes to having a child via surrogacy is, why don't you just adopt? And that's more of a big moral question, perhaps. What are your thoughts on that question in particular?
This is also a really great question that I get asked all the time. And I think adoption is amazing. I think it's so great. But just like surrogacy, it's a journey. It's a really long process. If you're a single person, if you're a same-sex couple, there's a lot of places in the world where that is not even an option for you. Even surrogacy as a same-sex couple is not an option in a lot of surrogacy-friendly countries. You know, then I think about the man and the woman who have gone through infertility for 10 years. They've been trying. They still have 3 embryos left. Are they going to get rid of those embryos? Or are they going to ask a surrogate to help them? Or are they going to go through 10 years of infertility and go, okay, well, now we're going to go on an adoption list for 5 years, right? At that point, they might say, by the time I'm able to adopt this baby, I'm already out of the age bracket that they will allow me to adopt with. So I think adoption is amazing. A lot of our intended parents are on adoption lists and are doing this at the same time, but it's really not just adopting. It's so difficult. There's a lot that comes with it as well. Also, when we're looking at normalizing same-sex families and giving them the same kind of rights that we have and stuff like that, it's the first time that really, same-sex families are able to have babies of their own genetics, and it kind of gives them the same sort of rights as heterosexual couples when it comes to raising their own family, especially for people that were maybe adopted. Right? They don't have blood relatives. And so having a baby of their own genetics might be very important to them. Everybody kind of comes into this for different reasons and chooses one partner over the other who's going to be the biological dad or whatever. So while I think adoption is amazing, and it's a great option, it's not always the best option or even a viable option for a lot of people.
It is wild that the process of adoption, although probably needed for it to be so rigorous and intense and lengthy, is quite a deterrent. That it can take so many years to be able to adopt a baby. And like you mentioned, maybe eventually you're out of the age bracket to even be able to adopt, which is something that completely escaped me and I wasn't even thinking about before.
Yeah.
I wonder if there's improvements that can be made there as well, because you're right, it is a lengthy process and a lot goes into it to just adopt, just like a lot goes into it to have a surrogate.
Yeah. And I mean, I think that with surrogacy, you have a lot more that's also in your control. There's a lot that's out of your control, but you're kind of this happens and this happens and this happens and this happens, right? Where with adoption, you're I'm here.
Who knows?
I hope it works out.
Yeah.
There's classes and there's all these different things that you need to do, but you're absolutely right. There's a lot of reasons why there needs to be that lengthy process to keep those children safe and not get put into any kind of trades or anything like that. That's scary stuff. There's so many kids in our system right now that really need homes of loving families and stuff like that. But for many people, especially same-sex couples, they'll never get that opportunity.
Whatever you want to do, as long as you're not harming anybody, you should be able to do. So if you want to adopt, you should be able to adopt. If you want to have a surrogate, you should be able to do that. As long as you're not hurting anybody else, everybody is consenting. I don't think there should be judgment really placed on anybody.
I think that's life, really.
But that's not the case.
No.
The people will judge you for whatever it is that you do.
100%. Because I think in the end, what it looks like is your equality means I have less equality. And,
right.
Equality is not a pie. It's not you get one piece, that means there's one less piece for me. It's it just actually means that we're all enriching our lives and we're all living in safety and in harmony.
Yeah. I mean, I get surprised specifically around surrogacy that so many people have a problem with it, but I was surprised with the types of arguments that people will come up with. Specifically religious people think it's a sin against God to be like creating a baby in a way that isn't penis and vagina.
Natural.
Quote unquote natural. Yeah.
And they'll like really fight against it, almost like to the level of abortion. And then other people are saying it's like human trafficking as well.
Yeah. This is a lack of listening to women being like, no, actually, I want to do this.
Yeah.
This is my choice. This is my body. I'm doing this amazing thing because I want to. Nobody forced me into being a surrogate. Like, I really wanted to do it. And I took a lot of consideration. I worked in the field for almost a year before I actually decided I was going to do it. It's really funny, the arguments that people come up with. And I think it really comes from a lack of education and understanding. I'm like, have you ever met a surrogate? Have you ever spoken to them about their experience? Have you asked any like questions that you're interested in to ensure that maybe people aren't being exploited or that this is their choice, that they are happy to see the intended parents with the baby, that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I think even doing the research for this episode, it brought up that parallel with sex work so much, just in terms of like legislative wise, where it's like you have maybe like one or two really negative stories that fearmonger, 100%. I guess. And then they don't really talk to the broader community about how actually everyone else is feeling or think about what were the factors that made that a negative experience for this person.
Yeah.
And then they put like a broad stroke law across everyone,
Yeah. And I mean, like in the work that I do, I can't say that everything's always hunky-dory all the time. Yeah. Like bad things happen. But compared to like the good things happening, like, yeah, there's like 1,000 times more good things that happen than the negative stuff. But, that doesn't sell, right? So, we want to see those negative things in the news articles and like all those kinds of things. So.
Yeah, of course. And I think bad things can happen in any sort of scenario, any sort of structure that you put it into. I think always bad things could happen because there's people who have bad intentions. So 100%. Bad things are always like a possibility. Also for people who say this is unnatural. You're driving a car, you're on your phone. Like there's so many things that we do that are unnatural. I think put that argument away.
I think it's also a very privileged thing to say. It's just like, because you were able to like get pregnant and carry a baby on your own. Well, guess what? Like, if you lost your leg tomorrow, I wouldn't say like, oh, don't put that prosthetic on. It's unnatural. You shouldn't just be in a wheelchair. Like, you know what I mean? Like nobody would say that. Again, this is more often a woman's issue than a men's issue. So again, I think it's one of those things where it's just like, it's unnatural.
So the next section that we want to get into is the surrogate experience. Now, for those that are interested in potentially becoming surrogates, can you share with us what your surrogacy journeys were like for you, both the good and the bad?
Well, I've been in 2 journeys. Both were really, really great in some ways, but I would say one has a happy ending and one has a sad ending. So I have a surrogate baby. She's not a baby anymore. She's 7. And I carried for a same-sex couple from France. And I think a large part of what made me want to have my own agency was how much I love them. Like, I don't know, I guess like when you have an idea about any kind of relationship, you're like, I'm going to go into this and it's going to be like this. And for me, it was like, it was just everything I had hoped for as far as like care and friendship and family. I ended up being when I was pregnant, I ended up being the ring bearer at their wedding with the baby. We put the ring on my belly.
That's
and
really
like,
cute.
It was just like, it was like a dream. I wanted it to be like a family feeling and a lifelong friendship feeling. And that's what I got. And I'm just like, so thankful. It was honestly a dream. And I love her. She's spicy. You know, like we talk still at least a few times a week and they'll be like, Nici, we're sending this baby back to you, first class. You make her too spicy. It's and then they ended up staying here for 4 weeks after she was born. And so I was able to breastfeed her. We lived a couple blocks away during that time. So we saw each other almost every day. One of their moms came down. It was bliss. And I mean, everything just went as it should. I ended up having a C-section, which I had never done before, but she just didn't want to come out. So that's the way she had to come out. And I was very scared, but I would say that was the most negative thing that happened from it. But it was also like an incredible experience to experience a C-section.
It's the first time I've heard somebody describe it as an incredible experience.
Well, okay. Well, I mean, so I also had my fallopian tubes removed at the same time. So that was like a treat for me. I was just like, goodbye now, goodbye. Yeah. So it was like, I got to like benefit from that as well. But most of the time in a C-section, only one support person is allowed in. And they allowed my husband and both dads to come in and experience it. And I was worried that I wasn't going to get to see them see their baby for the first time. And that I think what was hard for me. So to be able to like look over and like just crumple, like amazing. And I love them very much. And I love her very much. And I think that that was a thing too, is like, I was pregnant and I was like, don't get attached to the baby. Don't get attached to the baby. This isn't your baby, right? Like I was being so conscious about it. And then my niece was born. My sister had a baby and I loved her so much. And I was like, oh my God, you're the best. And then I'm like, oh, this is like my niece. I can love her so intensely, but in a different way. And it kind of like changed the switch in my brain and it was different from that day on. And I love her so deeply, but not the same way as my kids. Like it's just different. And in my second journey, I was working with a same-sex couple from the UK. Lovely, love them, have a wonderful relationship. Really great communication, boundaries, like everything was wonderful. I had a really hard time getting pregnant. So the first time it took me 2 tries to get pregnant. Typically in IVF, you don't get pregnant the first time. It takes usually a few times. This time I was getting IVF over and over and over again. I ended up doing IVF 5 times.
Is there a big toll on your body? Like, is that hormones and those kinds of things? Yeah,
it's a lot of medication. 3 of those I did back to back. And then we also had to try and see maybe why isn't this working? We did a biopsy. They lost my biopsy results. We had to do another biopsy. Like it was just like a lot of things.
At any point throughout that, did you feel like giving up?
I had a lot of people telling me like, it's okay to stop, right? Like, it's okay to stop. And I had said I was never doing it again. I was like, I'm done. But I met them as an interview to come to our agency. And I was like, oh man, because they had already been through so much and they were so lovely. And I was like, I'm going to make this happen for them. And so on our 5th try, I got pregnant and everything was going really great. They decided to come to Canada for our 12-week scan to come and see the baby themselves. It was really magical, really wonderful. And the week after they had come, I had a miscarriage.
Oof.
And after going through so much to try and get pregnant, it hit really hard. At that point, also, it was a choice that I was going to stop at that point because I probably could have done IVF again, but then I'm like, but then I have to be pregnant for 9 months after again. I've already been pregnant for 3 months. Like, I was like, I feel like I'm up to doing this for maybe another 6 months, but like, I don't think I can go beyond that. And I think that that's also a big part of it being a surrogate is like knowing your own boundaries, knowing your own abilities and like calling it quits when you have to, even though that's like so hard. But that being said, they have another surrogate and she's lovely. And I'm very excited to still be like supporting them in a different way and supporting her in a different way. And she's hopefully going to be getting pregnant before Christmas. So I'm like very excited for them.
That's exciting.
Yeah. And I think that's the hardest part about this, right? Is that you can come into this and you can spend all this money and all of this energy and at the end not have a baby. And that's a hard pill to swallow.
Yeah. I hear that miscarriages can be like very hard on you emotionally, I think like hormonally, physically so many different things.
Yeah.
Do you think there's a difference when it is like your own baby versus, or does your body just have its reaction the way it's going to have its reaction to it?
Honestly, I think it makes a difference of the kind of like support and care that you have. I couldn't have asked more from the hospital staff. Like they were all like super supportive. They were all very like quiet, kept the lights dim. Like they knew how to sort of set the scene for us, which was really nice. It had also been a few days that I had the time to kind of absorb what was happening before I actually went into the hospital for them to induce the labor. The intended parents were messaging me all throughout the day. They were calling me after. Angie, my business partner, she like came over, she took care of me, she made me food, she made food for my kids. Like I just had such great support. And I think that that's what makes like everybody's going to go through awful physical things. And even after giving birth to the baby, I still needed to have surgery. So it was not ideal, but I had incredible support. And I really feel like that's what makes the difference. And so that's why when we're looking at people who want to be a surrogate, we look at that support. Like, everything's great when things are going great, but when like, you know, the shit hits the fan, who's going to be there to help take care of you?
Would you say that the hardest part about that was the physical part or the emotional part?
Oh, emotional, 100%. Like physical, yeah, it was hard. I love my intended parents so deeply that knowing that they were also experiencing that loss and that we were so far apart from one another and I couldn't just give them a hug was like, that was the hard part about it. The nice thing is that a couple months later, I actually went to France for an event that we were throwing for our intended parents there. And they came to France and we were able to like go out and have like a really great night out together and kind of like heal through partying a little bit. And just like, we were able to like hug it out. And, you know, once we had all sort of also just like calmed down a little bit, like, not saying that we were over it, but that it wasn't like cripplingly sad like it was at first.
Talking about having support and having a rigorous screening process for a surrogate, in your experience, what makes somebody like a good candidate to be a surrogate? And what are maybe some of the red flags that you've noticed now to avoid?
Knowing yourself is really important, right? Knowing your boundaries, knowing your limits. You know, when we talk to people about what they want, if people are saying like, whatever, you know, I don't care, whatever they want, we're just like, no.
Slow down.
No. This is about you too, right? And so
unlocked the people pleaser.
Yeah, exactly. And a lot of us are, right? And so we make them understand the human aspect of it for them too. And we're just like, have you thought about it from this perspective? What about this for your kids? What about this for your partner? What about this, right? So we try to open up people's minds and see how they react to those kinds of things. One of the big things that we first look at, so like in a lot of surrogacy agencies, like people will often see like a commercial or whatever, and they'll be like, oh my God, this looks amazing, I'm going to do it. And then they're matched with somebody the next day. With Angie and I, you're with us between 4 and 6 weeks before we're matching you with intended parents so that we can see that you're responsive and that like, you know, when we're asking you certain questions, you're getting back to us in a certain amount of time, that you're actually going to the appointments you're going to go to. So like commitment is a big thing for us, right? Because this is a big commitment.
Huge.
And at a certain point, you're going to be very, very busy, right? And so we want to make sure that you're going to go to all those appointments and stuff like that. So we kind of suss out those red flags right in the beginning. You know, we talk to people about like smoking and, you know, drug use and all those kinds of things, right? Like if I say to somebody, I'm just like, so do you smoke pot? And they're like, no. And I'm like, you've never smoked pot? They're like, no. I'm like, really? Like, you know, I'm just like, okay. And with a lot of people, that's true, right? But I'm just like, I try to be like, you know, smoking a joint in Canada is now like having a beer, right? Like it's this same kind of like legality or whatever. And so I'm just like, hey, it's okay that you do this just so that you know you're going to be tested for this. So if you know, on occasion have a gummy or have a smoke, you're going to have to not do that anymore. As you get to know people, I think you kind of get to see who they are as people, how to support them, all that kind of stuff. People come from all sorts of walks of life. And so I think a large part of it is to be accepting of like people and where they're coming from, but also like why. And Angie and I have no issue asking the hard questions to people because at the end of the day, like we're vouching for people, right? We're vouching for intended parents and we're vouching for surrogates. And so we want to make sure that we have all the information that we have to be giving proper information to our clients.
Do you find you have to reject people a lot?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Like, what's the average percentage you think that you'd like rejections versus the keep pile?
50?
Really?
Maybe more?
Yeah.
Yeah, wow. Because like, you know, if someone comes in and I'm like, hey, do you smoke? And they're like, yeah. I go, cool. Well, you can't smoke while you do this. And I want to see that you're smoke-free for at least 3 months before you're even going to do this, right? Yeah. And so a lot of people don't come back just from that. A lot of people want to come and do this who have never had a baby before. And that's another one. So like if that were to happen, I say, you know, we don't accept people who haven't had babies, but this agency does. And so I'll send them over that way. A lot of people are too young. You have to be at least 21 years old. And typically we work with people until they're about 45, kind of depending, sometimes older, depending on people's stories.
Well, I'm surprised that people younger than 21 come.
Do you have a lot of those?
Oh, yeah.
Wow.
Really?
Yeah.
What typical reasons do people like come in wanting to do this? Because it being altruistic, I'm like, what motivates people, I guess, to come and see
Particularly
the very young
the very
people,
young ones. Yeah. And I would assume that maybe perhaps they haven't had a baby before. So
some of them have. Okay. So, you know, and in those kinds of cases, I think it is sort of like maybe this can help me make some money to bring me to like the next sort of like level so I can, you know, sustain myself better.
Yeah.
After some education, when we talk to people, that's another thing where they're like, oh, I'm not getting paid. Oh, I don't want to do this, which is like, that's fine, right?
Yeah.
But that's a big part of the education part, so that they're not getting to a certain point where they've met their intended parents and they go, hold on, I'm not getting paid. Hold on, I have to take a needle every day. I'm not doing this, right? So we want people to be informed fully before we're introducing
investing into people. Yeah, absolutely. But like, what is motivating people? I guess other people to do it if they know that it's altruistic already.
I can speak from a personal standpoint, which was like, I really wanted to carry for a same-sex couple because I wanted to normalize same-sex families. That was a big part for me. I love being pregnant. I don't get morning sickness. My skin looks great. My hair grows really long and thick.
Some of us are just blessed.
Yeah, we're just blessed,
Wow. Perfect candidate over here.
I mean, yeah, right? If somebody is like, oh, I throw up every day during my pregnancy, typically those aren't the people who are going to be a surrogate, right?
Yeah.
But for me, it's just another day. I'm just a little chunky, right? So I'm just, that's great for me. And the fact that I can do something like this for somebody else in such a grand way, I think is magic, right? It's it's a privilege. And there's some people who are like, I watched my aunt go through infertility in my whole childhood to watch her finally be able to have a child through adoption, through surrogacy, through IVF herself, right? People come into surrogacy for so many different reasons. My brother was gay, whatever, right?
He's cured now.
Yeah, that's another episode. He was gay, but now he's dead.
That is another episode.
Yeah.
Condolences.
2 topics right there.
Yeah, everybody comes into surrogacy for all different reasons. And then that also kind of changes who they choose as who they want to carry for as well, right? So some people come in and they're like, I want a same-sex couple. I want a heterosexual couple. I want to help a single mom. People have an idea in their head because of their own life experiences. And sometimes people just come in and say, I want the person who's been waiting the longest. That's kind.
Yeah, that is kind.
It is kind. Yeah. I mean, in a world where so many things are so hard and so hard to endure, to see this kind of kindness on a daily basis is really changed my life.
Yeah, it is very beautiful.
Quite selfless.
Very selfless. I personally can't imagine putting my body through that for someone else.
I can't anymore either. Don't worry. We're on the same page.
I wouldn't be the one. I think if it was a paid situation, maybe I would consider it. But it does. I don't know. I find it very impressive that people are willing to do it for free, just out of the kindness of their heart.
I do want to speak on that too for a moment, though, because I do believe that there is a monetary benefit to surrogacy in Canada. And that is that there are some things within your contract that you would be paying for anyway. So certain things like telecommunications, a portion of your food, that kind of thing. You can't pay for your rent, you can't pay for your car, that kind of stuff. But stuff to do immediately with your body, if you go for a massage once a month, that's going to get covered. Right. So there's certain things that you already pay for in your life, which you're going to get reimbursed if you give those receipts. So I look at it as a really good savings sort of thing. Yeah. Are you going to make $30,000? No, you're not. Yeah. Are you going to be able to put away $10,000 to $15,000? Maybe.
Yeah.
Maybe.
What do you think about the people that are like, I could never give up my baby, and I don't know how y'all do that? Because in my mind, I directly go to, well, then you're probably not a good candidate.
Yeah, that's exactly where my mind goes. I'm like, oh, well, no one's making you do it. Thank goodness.
You don't have to.
Yeah. Surrogacy is not for everybody. And I'm not here to say that it is at all. It's a very different way of getting pregnant. You are giving yourself shots every day for 10 weeks. You're taking all these medications to shut down certain things in your body and enlighten other things in your body. And you watch yourself get pregnant. A bunch of people watch you get. My dad watched me get pregnant on the internet. It was really strange and amazing.
As a separate soundbite, that might sound kind of questionable.
That's another episode. Yeah. And like I said, you're building this relationship with your intended parents in a way that you're so excited for them having a baby. You're not putting together the nursery. You're not nesting. You're not doing all these things. They are, and you're watching them do it. And I would say that even for myself, I didn't want to have any more kids when I was doing my surrogacy journey. So I'm like, please take this baby. Right. I do not want another baby. And a lot of people do that, right? When they're done creating their own family, they're like, I'm going to do this for another family. And, in no way do they want the baby? I've actually never experienced a surrogate in the many years that I've been doing this be like, oh, like,
can I keep it, please?
I'm like, there's a lot of easier ways to make a baby.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like nobody's
Yeah.
coming into this to take your baby.
Yeah, that was going to be my next question is like, how often do you encounter that? But I guess it's been 0 times.
0. There's been one case in Canada. This is a long story, but there was a case where the intended parents were from abroad. They ended up getting an adoption during the pregnancy of their surrogacy pregnancy. And the baby that they adopted had a lot of health problems that they didn't know about before they adopted him. And so when this baby was born, they're like, we're not coming.
What?
I
Wait, you
know.
can't do that. Can you do that?
Oh, apparently you can.
You can?
Was this like before all the legal document?
Oh, no. It was all there. It was all there. This was not a case that I worked on. This is a story that I heard through lawyers. They, at first, offered the surrogate, do you want to keep this baby? And she was like, no, thanks. No, thank you. And it actually ended up being adopted by a fertility lawyer who works in our community. And he had been trying to have a surrogate baby for a long time.
Oh, wow.
And it was like, yeah, it
worked
still a happy
out.
ending.
And like, I can't even say how, but this kid looks just like him too. Wow. Like I have no idea, but like, it's magic. Like, you know, this magical thing happened for this child in this kind of scary, sad scenario. In most cases, the surrogates do not want this baby. They are doing this for someone else. They are very clear in their mind why they're doing this and who they're doing it for.
Such a wild concept to me to put all of this money, your own genetics into this and then just not show up.
That was a thing. Neither of them had their genetics. Yeah,
Oh.
they both had an egg donor and a sperm donor. Still.
You still did it.
Still though. Yeah.
And you paid all the bills.
Some people, money is just money, right? They're just like, I got a lot of it. That's
Crazy. That's not me.
That's not me. No.
Good for you, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah. It's so funny because like, I mean, sometimes people call places in the States before they'll call us and then they'll talk to us and they're like, oh, this is cheap. And I'm like, it's cheap? For some people, like this is a drop in the bucket. And for some people, they're, you know, putting a second mortgage on their house, right? For some people, those kids aren't going to go to university, right? Like or they're not going to pay for them to go to university.
Do you think there's anything like psychologically different that's going to happen to you as like a child that is born of surrogacy? Any traumas there?
I believe that anybody who's been born through an egg donor should be in some kind of company file or something like that. Like, I don't even know how to say it. Like, there are people out there that go and donate their eggs multiple times.
Right.
And then, you know, in your contract, you can say, okay, when you're done with the embryos that you've created, you can donate them to another family, or you can destroy them, or you can give them to science or whatever. Yeah. But that means that those embryos can go to another family, and then there can be more babies, and there could be more babies. And so I think when it comes for people who are born through egg donation, to be able to know how many siblings they have out there, especially in like these tight-knit, like, you know, same-sex family communities in France, where maybe, you know, your friend is actually your half sibling, right? And stuff like that. So I think it's important for us to like know where we come from. A lot of egg donors are younger, and so a lot of them are anonymous. But even though people are anonymous, I think people should still be able to see if they have relatives out there.
Yeah.
So psychologically, I think that that's important. I also think it's really important to just be open about your story. There is no shame in this.
Totally.
Like whether you were born this way because of infertility, whether it's, I mean, obviously if it's a same-sex family, you're going to know pretty sooner rather than later why you were born through surrogacy. Just be really open about it. So like my surrogate child, she has a picture of me and her egg donor in her bedroom. It's not a secret, right? Like this is where you came from. You should be proud. There were so many people who were involved to make sure that you are here with us right now. And that's special.
Yeah. I mean, we have seen how many documentaries have come out recently, like on Netflix and stuff, about all of these like
that one guy
thousands of children potentially that are all related because of like the one guy from Europe or whatever. And then he like traveled the world and kept doing it. We should put some sort of global limit on that.
Sure.
Perhaps, or at least, you know, like really keep track of where all this DNA is coming from.
Exactly.
How common is it that this whole process is kept a secret from the child that is born from surrogacy?
I've been doing this for almost 10 years. And I would say that as time has gone on, it has become less of a stigma to talk to your children about this and to your family and everything. But, you know, our intended parents also come from all different religious backgrounds, walks of life, all that kind of stuff too. And just like, you know, how people are prejudiced against surrogacy, that doesn't stop at the intended parents, right?
Yeah.
Their families can be like that. Many, many years ago, I had a situation where the intended mother put on a hospital gown and got in the bed and held the baby like she had a baby, because her family would have never accepted the fact that she went through this with a surrogate.
That's a psychological trip.
You're telling me. I mean, I'm not one to judge, to know what they have to go through for the rest of their life for that child to be accepted into their family and all those kinds of things, right?
What's your personal opinion on keeping that a secret versus not?
I don't think it should be a secret. At all. I think that people should know where they came from. I think people should know everything about themselves that they can know. It's like knowing your blood type. It's like, you know, knowing what your your genetics are. Like, I feel like that's really important. When we look at people who have been adopted and stuff like that, we see how much they search to find their biological families because they want to know about themselves. They want to know where they came from. And I think it's a fundamental part of like figuring out who we are and having autonomy, right?
Absolutely. I agree. I mean, I don't think that there should ever be shame in how you were brought into the world.
But you can't help what the world
You can't help what the world thinks, but as someone who was once a child.
Drawing that personal experience.
For some of us, it was a little bit longer ago than others.
Former child speaking here. I think that it would be far more traumatizing for me to find out later rather than sooner, especially if the way that I found out was not via my parents.
Yes.
Probably the longer that you contain it, especially if it eventually spills out, the can of worms gets bigger and bigger and bigger.
Like, I think of myself right now. If I found out right now that my parents were my parents, I would have a life crisis. Like, I would be like, what? Who am I? What's going on? Like, you know, it would be a bad trip. Bad trip. I have gone to conferences and seen people speak who are adults who found out as adults and how detrimental it was to their sense of self and their relationship with their parents. And like, for some of them, it ended their relationship with their parents because they were like, oh my God, how can you keep this from me, right? My whole life. As somebody who's never experienced this myself, to see adults who have experienced this and to know what it meant to them, like, I would say that from what I can tell, like, it is so important that everybody knows their entire story.
Last section that we want to dive into is really around supporting surrogates and then queer birthing kind of in general, to just add in a little bonus question for people that's slightly off topic. What supports do you think are important that a surrogate has at their disposal throughout this process?
Community. There's a lot of people who are surrogates who don't know anybody else who's a surrogate, right? And I think in any kind of walk of life, to have other people around you who know what you're going through, it's very, very important. And so something that's really important to Angie and I is to have support groups. Every other week we do live meetups online. We do meetups in person. We do this thing every year called Camp Hive, where we fly in all of our surrogates from all over Canada, and we have like this big camp sleepover where we braid each other's hair and we just like talk shit and like, you know, eat crap food and do yoga and do singing bowls. And like, you know, we have people come in and like, you know, treat them, and just so that you can make friends for life through this too, because like to have other people understand what you're going through is invaluable.
The heck? That sounds great.
You can come.
Sick. I'm invited.
There's a lot of other like online forums and stuff like that. There's even like groups online that are specific to like the month that you did IVF and something like that. So like people will like be pregnant with people at the same time and all give birth around the same time and stuff too. So there's like a lot of stuff like that. Another thing that is really important is I'm a big fan of therapy. And so to be able to have that at people's disposal, we always ensure that people have that in their contracts, you know, for a certain amount up to 6 months after as well, and also available to their children and their spouses if they have one.
So, surprise for our listeners, you're also a queer doula and birth worker. And I'm wondering, this was an audience question. We put this out on our YouTube channel asking if people had any questions. And a lot of people responded. A lot of people are interested in this topic.
Nice.
But they're wondering, how do you recommend other practitioners queer their practice?
Say it loud, say it proud all the time, not just during Pride. You know what I mean? Like Angie and I are very proud to be a queer-owned business, and we talk about it all the time. Just in the kind of business that we're in, because we are supporting queer families, it's really easy for us to always be putting it out there. Being queer isn't trendy. It's a way of life. We're always serving queer people in all of our businesses. So like put it out there all the time.
The work that you're doing, it sounds like a lot of very high highs and a lot of like very low lows.
Agreed.
How do you manage that?
How do you stay sane?
Yeah, I mean, who said I was saying that wasn't that? Don't at me with your sanity here.
Do you see the color of my hair?
This is coming out naturally. I don't know what's going on. I think part of it is I've been doing this for a long time. I don't think I'm desensitized to the negativity, but like at the same time, I'm not like, this is crippling. And, you know, whether or not things are going bad or good, emotions are always high. It doesn't matter, right? Because even if you get a positive pregnancy test, you're like, oh my God, this is great. But what if it's going to be over soon, right? Angie and I are also there to be those mediators to like talk those things out and be like, give us your crazy, tell us your crazy things. Tell us, you know, we're not here to judge you because it probably won't be the first time we've heard it.
What would be like your biggest advice to couples who are seeking surrogacy?
Talking to other intended parents who are at the same stage as you, who have gone through the entire process, who have succeeded through the process, who have not succeeded through the process, not just like sticking to the scary stories that you're reading online, right? Because that's a very small percentage of actually what's going out there in the surrogacy community. You know, just immersing yourself in the community, there's a lot of also conferences and stuff like that. There's one called Men Having Babies, which I've spoken at, that is international. They're all over the world. Talking to lots of agencies, just getting all the information you can and immersing yourself in it, because your journey is sort of like what you make it, right? Like your journey can go in a lot of different ways, and you figuring out what's going to be best for you is so important.
And normalize it also, because it's happening. People are going to use the service like no matter what, regardless of like other people's opinions and whatever scrutiny they might get. I think the more that we normalize things, the easier it would be, the easier on the parents, easier on the parents' families, easier on the child.
You know, not like these intended parents especially have already been through infertility, haven't gone through enough, right? They don't need the scrutiny of people being against the fact that they're having a baby through surrogacy.
Well, thank you so much for being here and sharing your story really vulnerably with us and putting up with a lot of our just off-the-dome questions of intrigue.
I feel really lucky to be living my passion and working in something I'm so passionate about. I don't think a lot of people can say that they like do their 8 hours a day and feel like I feel at the end of the day. So I know that that's rare, and I'm just, super thankful I get to do this and get to meet so many awesome people in the process.
So that's everything that we have for you today. And if you want to dive deeper into queer parenting, we have a whole episode on it. It's called The Hidden Injustices of Queer Parenting. Make sure to subscribe and leave a like. And if you're listening on your favorite podcast app, make sure to leave us a 5-star review because it really helps a lot. That's everything that we got. And until next time, peace.